What if the most powerful special operations force on Earth was created because of one disastrous night in the Iranian desert? In April of 1980, the United States launched a secret mission deep inside Iran. The objective sounded impossible: rescue American hostages from the heart of Tehran without triggering a full-scale war. But something went horribly wrong. Helicopters disappeared into massive sandstorms. Fuel trucks exploded into towering fireballs. American aircraft burned in the middle of the desert while classified documents scattered across the sand. By sunrise, 8 U.S. servicemen were dead, and Iran was celebrating what it called a divine victory over America. The world watched the humiliation unfold in real time, but buried beneath the wreckage of that failed mission was the blueprint for something far more dangerous. Because after Operation Eagle Claw collapsed, the Pentagon quietly began building a machine unlike anything the world had ever seen. And decades later, that machine would come back for everyone. The crisis began in 1979. Iran was collapsing into revolution. For decades, the United States had backed Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a powerful ally who helped secure American influence across the Middle East. But by the late 1970s, anger inside Iran had reached a breaking point. Massive protests erupted. The Shah fled the country, and into the chaos stepped Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Everything changed almost overnight. American flags were burned in the streets. Revolutionary crowds chanted "Death to America," and Washington suddenly found itself facing a hostile regime sitting on one of the world's most strategically important regions. Then came the decision that detonated the crisis. The Shah, now dying from cancer, requested entry into the United States for medical treatment. President Jimmy Carter approved it. Inside revolutionary Iran, that decision was viewed as betrayal. On November 4th, 1979, thousands of radical Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Marines guarding the compound were overwhelmed. Diplomats were blindfolded. Hostages were dragged through hallways at gunpoint while cameras rolled outside. At first, the takeover was supposed to last only a few days, but then Ayatollah Khomeini publicly endorsed the seizure. Suddenly, the hostage crisis transformed into a global geopolitical showdown. America demanded the release of its citizens. Iran refused. Sanctions followed. Diplomatic ties were severed. Iranian assets were frozen. International mediators attempted negotiations. Nothing worked. And as the days passed, the humiliation became unbearable. Every night, television broadcasts showed American hostages blindfolded and paraded before cameras. ABC launched a special nightly program simply to track the crisis day by day. Day 50, day 100, day 200. The United States looked powerless. Meanwhile, inside the embassy, the hostages endured psychological torture, mock executions, isolation, constant threats. Guards staged fake firing squads to terrify prisoners into submission. The pressure on the White House became immense. President Carter faced growing public anger. Yellow ribbons appeared across America. Political allies demanded action. And finally, after months of failed diplomacy, Carter authorized a military rescue operation. But there was one enormous problem. The United States military was completely unprepared for a mission like this. In 1980, America's armed forces barely functioned together. The Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines operated almost like rival corporations. They used incompatible radios, separate command systems, different operational doctrines. Inter-service resentment was everywhere. There was no unified special operations command, no joint counterterrorism structure, no permanent rescue force. And yet somehow, these fractured organizations were now expected to execute one of the most complex hostage rescue missions in modern history. What happened next would expose every weakness inside the American military system. But the Pentagon had already committed, and this is where the situation became dangerous. A newly created unit called Delta Force was selected to lead the assault. At the time, Delta was barely operational. Founded only a few years earlier by Colonel Charlie Beckwith, the unit had been modeled after Britain's legendary SAS. Beckwith believed America needed an elite surgical strike force capable of responding rapidly to terrorist crises anywhere in the world. Many Pentagon leaders dismissed the idea until Iran forced their hand. Now Delta Force was about to attempt its first real-world mission under the eyes of the entire planet. And the mission itself sounded insane. Operators would infiltrate Iran using helicopters launched from an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. They would fly hundreds of miles across hostile territory at night, establish secret desert refueling sites, infiltrate Tehran using CIA vehicles, assault the embassy compound, seize an Iranian airfield, and evacuate dozens of hostages under potential enemy fire. Everything depended on precision. Everything depended on timing. And America had never attempted anything remotely this ambitious before. Then came April 24th, 1980. The night Operation Eagle Claw began. At first, everything moved according to plan. 6 massive C-130 transport aircraft lifted off from Oman, carrying Delta Force operators, Rangers, fuel equipment, and supplies. Far out in the Arabian Sea, 8 RH-53D helicopters launched from the deck of the USS Nimitz and disappeared into the darkness toward Iran. The mission required absolute synchronization, but almost immediately the operation started falling apart. One helicopter suffered mechanical failure and was forced to land in the desert. Another became lost inside a massive haboob, a gigantic wall of sand capable of swallowing entire aircraft formations. Pilots suddenly found themselves flying blind. Visibility collapsed to zero. Sand blasted through engines and avionics systems. Helicopter crews became separated in the storm. Navigation systems malfunctioned. Communication deteriorated. And this was only the beginning. Military planners had underestimated one critical reality of operating deep inside Iran's desert terrain. Nature itself had become the enemy. Despite the chaos, several helicopters managed to limp toward the rendezvous point known as Desert One, a remote salt flat hundreds of miles from Tehran where aircraft would refuel before continuing the mission. But when the surviving helicopters finally arrived, another disaster struck. A critical hydraulic failure disabled one of the remaining aircraft. Now the mission had dropped below the minimum number of helicopters required for the assault. Operationally, Eagle Claw was dead. The rescue had to be aborted, but extracting the force safely would prove even harder than getting in. Because while American crews scrambled to reorganize, civilian vehicles suddenly appeared on a nearby road. An Iranian passenger bus rolled directly into the middle of the covert staging area. Then came a fuel truck. Operators attempted to stop it. Instead, the truck erupted into an enormous explosion that illuminated the desert for miles. The covert mission was no longer covert. The entire operation had descended into chaos. And then came the moment nobody expected. As aircraft prepared for evacuation, one helicopter attempted to reposition through heavy dust clouds generated by its own rotor wash. Pilots lost visual reference. Inside the swirling brownout, the helicopter drifted directly into a parked C-130 transport aircraft loaded with thousands of gallons of fuel. Seconds later, the desert exploded. A massive fireball tore through the night sky. Burning aviation fuel engulfed both aircraft instantly. Ammunition cooked off inside the flames. Rockets launched uncontrollably through the air. Tracer rounds sprayed across the desert while surviving personnel sprinted for cover. 8 American servicemen were killed. The remaining force fled Iran immediately. And behind them, they left disaster, destroyed aircraft, classified documents, intelligence materials, operational maps, even the names of covert CIA personnel operating inside Tehran. At sunrise, Iranian forces reached the wreckage. The propaganda victory was enormous. Television broadcasts showed burned American aircraft sitting helplessly in the desert. Iranian leaders declared that divine intervention had defeated the United States. Ayatollah Khomeini called it a miracle from God. For America, the humiliation was catastrophic. But inside the Pentagon, something even more important was happening. Military analysts began asking brutal questions. Why couldn't the services communicate properly? Why were pilots unprepared for desert operations? Why did no unified command structure exist? Why was America improvising missions this dangerous with temporary organizations assembled at the last minute? The answers terrified military leadership. Because Operation Eagle Claw revealed something deeply alarming. America's military system itself had become the vulnerability, and what military planners built afterward would permanently change modern warfare. Within months, sweeping reforms began. The Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, was created to unify elite units under one operational structure. Then came SEAL Team 6, then the Night Stalkers. Highly specialized aviation crews trained exclusively for covert insertion missions under extreme conditions. Everything became integrated: pilots, intelligence, electronic warfare, signals interception, air support, drone reconnaissance, direct action teams. The Pentagon was no longer building individual units, it was building an ecosystem, a machine designed specifically to prevent another Desert One. And over the next 2 decades, that machine became terrifyingly effective. The world truly saw the results after 9/11. By then, the transformation was complete. The lessons learned from Iran had evolved into a global counterterrorism apparatus, unlike anything in modern military history. Special operations forces moved faster than traditional armies. Intelligence could be processed in real time. Surveillance drones tracked targets across continents. Operators could launch missions within hours instead of weeks. The Pentagon had built exactly what Eagle Claw failed to create: unified warfare. In Afghanistan, Green Berets linked up with anti-Taliban fighters while coordinating devastating B-52 airstrikes from horseback deep inside mountainous terrain. In Iraq, JSOC launched relentless nighttime raids that dismantled insurgent leadership networks piece by piece. Every mission fed intelligence into the next mission. Every captured laptop, every intercepted phone call, every surveillance image. The system became self-feeding. But perhaps the clearest example came in May of 2011, the raid on Osama bin Laden. What military analysts noticed immediately was how different the operation looked compared to Eagle Claw. Stealth-modified helicopters crossed international borders undetected. SEAL Team 6 operators executed synchronized room-clearing operations with extraordinary precision. Backup aircraft waited nearby. Intelligence support operated continuously. Communications flowed seamlessly between agencies and military units. Even military working dogs equipped with night vision systems became part of the operation. The mission lasted only minutes. Bin Laden was dead before sunrise, and underneath the success of that raid was the shadow of Iran. Because every failure from 1980 had quietly shaped the modern special operations world. The failed communications, the incompatible command structures, the aviation disasters, the lack of coordination, all of it had been studied, dissected, and rebuilt into something far more lethal. But there is another side to this story, one far more dangerous, because the same machine designed for counterterrorism now exists inside an increasingly unstable global environment. Tensions with Iran still simmer across the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the world's most critical strategic choke points. American aircraft carriers patrol nearby waters constantly. MQ-9 Reapers monitor hostile activity. F-35 fighter jets operate alongside missile defense systems across the Gulf. And every major power has been studying America's special operations doctrine for years. Russia, China, Iran, all of them understand the implications. Modern warfare is no longer just about armies colliding on battlefields. Now it's about precision strikes, cyber operations, electronic warfare, drone swarms, rapid decapitation missions, the ability to project force silently and globally. And that reality traces directly back to one failed rescue mission in 1980. Operation Eagle Claw was supposed to rescue hostages. Instead, it reshaped the future of war itself. The burning wreckage at Desert One was supposed to symbolize American weakness. Instead, it became the foundation for one of the most sophisticated military systems ever created. 8 servicemen died in the Iranian desert that night, but from that disaster emerged JSOC, SEAL Team 6, the Night Stalkers, and the entire architecture of modern U.S. special operations warfare. For decades, the world has watched the results unfold in real time. From Afghanistan to Iraq, from covert raids to high-value target eliminations, The shadow of Operation Eagle Claw still hangs over modern military strategy. And now, as tensions continue rising across the Middle East once again, one question remains. If another global crisis erupts tomorrow, how far is this machine prepared to go? And more importantly, who's next?